Halloween or All Hallows Eve is celebrated on 31st October. It's a time for lighting lanterns and bonfires and telling spooky stories about ghosts and witches. But it has its origins in Celtic history and was once known as Samhain, the night when the spirits of the dead would roam the earth. The word Halloween is a shortened version of All Hallows Eve or All Saints' Day, the night before a festival to celebrate the saints, when people would fast before a lavish feast the next day. 1st November was chosen by Pope Gregory in the 8th century, but many years before this, pagan traditions had this day to celebrate the end of summer, or rather the end of lighter evenings, and the harvest. It was also a time to welcome people in and prepare for winter. The Christian Church, in its effort to get rid of paganism, superseded the date, so the day before became Halloween. There was a belief Halloween was the day when the earthly world and the spirit world were closest to one another, and all kinds of magical things happened. In Scotland, one of the first things to be dealt with for Halloween was the lantern. Turnips, or neeps as they are known, were hollowed out and scary faces carved into them, and these were known as tatty bogles. The lid would be cut just below the stalk, so there was easy access to place a candle in it. These were used to scare off ghosts and ghouls that dared to try and enter the house. It's thought it was a throwback to the days when skulls were placed on poles to ward off evil spirits. Today, the American tradition of pumpkin lanterns, which are much easier to carve out, are used instead of the traditional neeps. Fires are also synonymous with Halloween. The light from the fire was also believed to ward off evil spirits. Another tradition is duking for apples. Apples are placed in a bucket or basin of water, and as they bob, children try to bite into them, as they're not allowed to use their hands to grab them. Another method is a fork held between the teeth, while the child sits on a turned-round chair that's dropped to try and spear the apple. Usually, their hands are kept behind their backs, or they hold on to the chair. Treacle scones is another tradition, and very messy. A scone is attached to a piece of string and dangled in front of the player, then covered in treacle. The same rules apply as for duking for apples, in that the hands must be kept away from the scone, but this time the children are blindfolded. They can only use their mouths to bite into it. Going back to apples, there's an old tradition that states if you peel an apple and the skin comes off in one continual strip, you should toss it over your shoulder. When it lands, it should be in the shape of a letter of the alphabet, and is supposed to be the first initial of the person you're going to marry. Nuts were also used in the Halloween tradition. Engaged couples would each take a nut and throw it into the fire. If the nut burned quietly, it meant the marriage would be a happy one. If, however, it spat and crackled, the marriage would be stormy. At the dining table, a place would be set with food, but it wasn't for a person to sit at. It was always left unoccupied as a welcome to any spirits who were passing through. A bowl was also set aside with small objects placed in it, then covered with oatmeal, cream and sugar. Known as CO.AG, each person was given a spoon to take some of the concoction out. When they found an object, it was used to tell their fortune. Finding a button meant you'd never marry, whereas finding a coin meant riches. A thimble meant celibacy, and a ring meant that the person would be the first in the assembled group to get married. Dressing up and going round chapping or knocking on neighbours' doors is another old tradition known as guising. This is not to be confused with the 5th November tradition of penny for the guy. This is when an effigy of Guy Fawkes, who attempted to blow up the Houses of Parliament in London in 1605, is thrown onto a fire. Fireworks are also let off to symbolise the gunpowder that would have ignited and blown up the building. Guises can be anything, but are mostly witches, ghosts and skeletons. By dressing up, it was thought they would blend in easily with the ghosts who wandered round on Halloween and keep them safe. After knocking on the door, the guiser would sing a song, recite a poem or perform a trick, and as a reward would receive either some money or a treat, either chocolates, sweets, nuts or fruit. Nowadays, children just hope to get a reward for turning up. In the Highlands, if any pranks are carried out, it was blamed on the mischief-making fairies, and they got away with it. A couple of examples include a farmer's cart being dragged to a pool and a plough carried to the top of a neighbouring hill. The American tradition of trick-or-treat is rooted in this old tradition. Scotland has a strong fishing heritage, and at least one tradition is worth noting. On the Isle of Lewis, people would gather on Halloween and offer up a pint of ale to the sea for the Celtic water spirit, Shoni. Scotland's most famous poet, Robert Burns, wrote a poem about Halloween. He said it was thought to be the night when witches, devils and other mischief-making beings are all abroad on their baneful midnight errands. Witches, the devil and ghosts are synonymous with Halloween. Witches were accused of being in the service of the deil, as the devil is known in Scotland, so one tradition was for young boys to go round the local town or village and collect peats to throw in the fire where witches were once burned. It's also worth mentioning the 1735 Witchcraft Act, which banished the eating of pork pastries on Halloween and wasn't repealed until the 1950s. In the Hebrides, it was tradition to leave out a saucer of milk for the Cat-She, a kind of fairy in local folklore. In return, the Cat-She would bless the house. However, if no saucer of milk appeared, the household was cursed to have their cow's milk dry up. A tradition from the borders used to be that an unmarried young woman would take 3 pails of water into her bedroom. At midnight, her lover's apparition would appear and move them. In order to make the charm work, however, the young woman had to pin 3 holly leaves to her nightdress over her heart and go to bed. We may think that uncomfortable, but it was holly without the sharp prickles, and was known as she-holly. In another charm, the leaves of the ash tree were counted, the object being to find an even number, which was deemed to be a lucky sprig. The ash was revered for its magic over the powers of darkness. There is one final ceremony worth mentioning, and it involved an egg. It was pierced in one end with a pin, and 3 drops of the white were allowed to drop into a glass of water. The albumen began to form strange shapes, which the spaewife present would say was the man the girl was destined to marry. The girl was then to drink the water, but hold it in her mouth, then leave. The first name she heard called out would be that of her future husband, and at that point she was supposed to swallow the contents in her mouth. These are some of Scotland's old Halloween traditions, some of which survive to this day. If you enjoyed this episode of Scotland's History, please like, comment and subscribe. Until next time, thank you for watching.